3.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
That sounds strange to say good morning at a talk, but that's okay. That's how Joe set it up, and I'll go with it. Hopefully, we'll all go with that. My name is Greg Huber. I'm an architectural historian, and I consider myself a tree and forest folklorist. I don't know forest ecology like I could, and probably a number of you know, but I've enjoyed trees enormously in the last 50 plus years. It's my deep interest and connection to the world, and I'm really thrilled to be here, and I mean that. Joe emailed me out of nowhere and said, would you like to give a talk? And somebody had called him, I guess. Was that right? You remember that at all?
Dan Tassi, who's here, if you raise your hand.
Yeah.
Dan provides some kind of literature or something that had your name on it, and I jumped on
Can
that.
you speak just a little bit louder?
Speak louder?
A little louder.
Wow. Okay. I don't usually get that. They said, simmer down, simmer down. Okay, anyway, we're going to present a tree talk. It's going to be very different from anything that I've ever done before. I've given a number of tree talks. And one of the things I'm going to do, first off, I want to dedicate this talk this morning to 3 people who could not make it here. They're close friends of mine, Dee Dee, Ashley, and Kathleen. They couldn't make it, so I wish they were here. And anyway, so they'll be dedicated. They're dedicated to this talk. So I'm going to be going over a lot of things. Joe gave me an hour and a half to talk, and about a half hour or so for questions and answers, and any other things that you may have on your mind. I really want this to be an interactive thing. I don't know everything about trees, and I don't portray to be that way. And I want anything that you want to say, corrections, or just anything you can add to what I'm saying or anything. There are books for sale. This is the book that came out that I did 6 years ago, The Historic Barns of Southeastern Pennsylvania. Roger, right?
Yes.
He gets a 3% discount. I'm sorry, I can't do that for everybody else, but he gets a 3%. Thank you. He's just looking at me. So I'm going to, in the beginning now, I'm going to first read to you some passages from a great, great book. I found out about this book very, very accidentally about 10 years or so ago. I was actually visiting a Druidic priestess in northwest Massachusetts. And she had to leave her house for several minutes, and I was there by myself, and I was sitting right next to a bookshelf and just pulled out this book, and it was called Proto-Indo-European Trees. I said, what the heck is that? And I didn't know anything about pi, Proto-Indo-European, pi trees. And this is a book that focuses on words of trees that native European people gave to trees from about 2700 BC to 4000 BC. And so that's 4,700 to 6,000 years ago. And I was just astonished. I had never seen anything like that. I was just really hyper about it. You may have never been presented any information like this, and really, in one real sense, this is the highlight of our talk this morning. I consider that to be the highlight, really. And I just don't want to leave anything out in a way of a preface, so I guess I'll go right to that. I have another book that has 2 citations to oak specifically. This is really a talk on trees for sure, but there's going to be a special emphasis on oak. And it seems as if, a lot of people, their favorite tree is oak. Dee Dee, the one that I mentioned before that I dedicated this talk to, her license plate is Quercus.
Yeah.
So what more do you want? And this woman is the most crazed tree person I've ever known in my life. I've known Dee Dee for almost 50 years. Trees are her life. And I'm sorry she couldn't make it here today. But in any event, and I talked to Paul Friedrich. He's probably about 90 now if he's alive. I only talked to him once or twice. But I'm going to read this to you. Now I know that the things that I'm going to be saying to you are kind of fragmented in a certain way. I mean, it would be good if you all had a copy and you could read it and you know what certain words meant and everything. And I still don't know. I certainly don't know everything in this book. So it's going to be fragmented to a certain way, but all I'm going to ask you to do is to bear with me. But this is, if one thing could be left with you, and you could look back on this talk maybe 5 or 10 years from now or something like that, you'll remember at least a few of the things that came out of my reading this. And this lighting is perfect. I don't know how that happened. I guess it's from the screen. Okay, this monograph, an outgrowth of my working paper at the Third International Conference of Indo-Europeanists, is the first major study of the arboreal system of the Proto-Indo-Europeans, or P-I-E, since that of Hoops in 1905. So that's a period of about 65 years. Next selection. A second assumption is that the cultural system partly includes a second symbolic system, that of language. I say partly because the degree of inclusion depends on the type of language subsystem. For example, the cult, everybody hear me? Yep. For example, the cult symbolism of Druidic oak worship is almost completely discrete from the question of laryngeal sounds or ergative clause types in pi. I looked that word up for you and me. It has to do with the way nouns are used in certain cases. Who knows that word, ergative? In fact, the subsystems of sound, the phonology, and of the linear ordering of referential units, morpho-syntax in a narrow sense, are relatively independent of the cultural symbolic system. So what I want to say about that paragraph is that this really, really gets involved. I mean, you got to be you have to have a vocabulary of 1 million words, and you really have to follow this very, very carefully. I guess it's meant for professionals who can really look at this and really make sense out of it. It's not meant for the lay reader, I would have to assume. So we have to bear with them again on that point. For all its battery of natural scientific instruments, the field of paleobotany often entails precarious and problematical inferences and depends heavily on personal judgment about data that is often inadequate and variables that are numerous. My own opinion is that the pollen-based inferences of the paleobotanist about the Atlantic period in Eastern Europe are of about the same order of accuracy and validity as the inferences based mainly on ancient texts of the paleolinguist working on pi, P-I-E. Granted these qualifications, I still think that the Indo-Europeanist can safely turn to the paleobotanist for answers on whether a genus was present or absent in a general area such as Germany or the Ukraine over a long period of time, such as the late Atlantic. What he's really saying, of course, is the immense complexity of this whole world of trees, of natives naming trees in the ways that they did. I also suspect that if we get more carbon-14s from the USSR, they will not greatly alter the picture of what trees were present in the Pi homeland during the Atlantic. Now, at one point, okay, I'm not there yet. All right. At the core of the new arboreal environment was the oak. His favorite tree is unquestionably the oak, which I didn't expect to see. I didn't think really anything until I got to the end of the book. At the core of the new arboreal environment was the oak, which expanded at the expense of the elm, hazel, maple, ash, and pine. Remember, this is all Europe, often mixing with them over protracted periods. The main species was the brown or English oak, Quercus robur, which more or less during the 5th and part of the 4th millennium covered with great forests the landscape of Germany and Ukraine and intervening and contiguous zones. Pardon me, the oak line extended about 300 miles north of its present position with giant exemplars of the genus in far northern Russia, I guess the European part of Russia. Mixed with hazel, maple, and beech, it dominated most of the Caucasus, which is today the Eurasian area, with the greatest subgeneric differentiation, a total of 9 species, 17 according to one Soviet authority, whose criteria for the line between species and variety are obviously different. The paleobotany of the oak relates to several fascinating problems in the linguistic, pardon me, a semantic interpretation of several Pi terms. I'm going to have to take some water. He adds 3 words here. He adds 3 words here that I'm just going to try to pronounce, and they're short words though. They're Aug, A-U-A-Y-G, Perk, P-E-R-K, and Dor, D-O-R-W. And the Dor one is the most important one for us today. So let me go back a little bit. And he actually lists, and I want to do this before we go on. He has 4 chapters: methods and concepts, botanical ordering, 18 arboreal units, and conclusions. Here are the 18 arboreal units: the birch, the conifers, the junipers and cedars, the populus, the willows, the apples. It's interesting how he keeps saying the apples, the maples, the alder, the hazel, the nut, the elms, the linden, the ash, the hornbeam, the beech, the cherry, the yews, which is a very important tree in Pi terms, and the oaks. He left that till last. And there's 3 subdivisions of the oaks, and that's the only tree he has subdivisions of. So that's how he regarded and what he basically found about the oaks. Okay, so let me find my other spot, which I didn't take down. Okay, now we're on the oaks. I hope I have this right. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay, well, all right, I'm not going to do that. In sum, indic appears to be cognate, to have cognates. Now, cognates is just simply a word that where 2 things have the same origin. Okay? 2 words have the same origin. Those are cognates. Of the second oak name, and several major Indologists and Indo-Europeanists have adduced and interrelated several problematical indic forms in a way that somewhat enhances the putative link between the oak and the sacred. Okay. As late as 1156, a bishop visiting Lubeck saw a grove in which an oak tree was enclosed by a court and a fence of stakes and dedicated to the god of the land, proven of whom there was no idol present. Okay. Sorry. Okay, in sum, the early Balts, the people from Baltic area, appear to have associated the ideas of thunder. Sorry, I had this thing in my throat, and you'll probably have to hear that a number of times. The ideas of thunderstorm, stone, hill, high god, and oak. The same concatenation of the semantic field that had been emerging from the foregoing discussion of other stocks of trees. Okay. And again, I know this is disjointed, but I'm trying to give you a feel, again, for what. Now, this I think is the best. I'm going to take that off and put that there. Okay. All right. Among the Balts, with many, this is almost the whole page. Among the Balts, with many sacred oak groves in the region where oakwood fires burned to the primeval gods of thunder and to the high gods, particularly at the great religious center of Romov. Among the Teutons, where sacred oak fires burned to Daenerys' eye, the thunder god, and where anyone disfiguring certain living oaks were executed by fiendish tortures. Okay. Makes sense. Among the italics, with their perpetual oak fires, again, of the vestigial virgins. There was a song of the vestigial virgins back in the 70s, wasn't that right? And their high god Jupiter, honored in the form of an old oak in the capital of the religious status of the oak in later Latin times, Quintilian says, oh boy, that's Latin, so we're not going to do that. Okay, among the Celts, unless somebody speaks Latin here, or knows Latin. Among the Celts, the Druidic priests ate the acorns, worshipped in groves of oak, lighted the sacred oakwood fires by friction with oak sticks, and cultivated the mistletoe. The gold of Fraser's Golden Bough, which is a well-known book, of course. The Celtic high god was personified in an oak tree. The Celtic Druids, with their vestigial oak cult, appear to have been the social structural cognates of the Magi of Iran and the Brahmins of India, where, because of cultural and ecological factors, the oaken aspects of religious ritual disappeared. The 5 tribal divisions, Balts, Teutons, Greeks, Italics, and Celts, all strongly attest a connection between 4 complex symbolic clusters: tribal priests, thunder, lightning god, a high god or gods, and the oak tree alone or in groves. Both the wide diffusion and the emotional intensity of these ancient patterns of culture, not paralleled by those of any other tree, suggest that the oak was one of the underlying themes in Pi culture, a basic life symbol, and a root of myth and of sacrament. The oak was a nexus or a connection of symbolic articulation between the semantic system of the tree names and the cultural system of religious beliefs and ritual concerning the supernatural. Okay, I think this is going to be the last page, and we'll do that. But I think Osthoff, it was an author who he mentions in the back of the book, I think Osthoff was closer to nature and regular semantic change when he derived these meanings from oak. In the particular, the species of oak which is hardest and which was dominant in the Pi homeland area. That is the brown or English oak, Quercus robur, which we brought up before. 5th, the uniquely wide distribution and the rich formal differentiation of the reflexes, which may be a vestige of the important role of the oak in the lives of Pi. Last, on the more general grounds, it seems probable that the primitive, arboreal-oriented Pi distinguished several species of oak by distinct morphs, and that those 3 words that I gave you before, the AYG, the PERK, and the DORW, served in this way. As the oak and mixed oak forests were reduced and contracted, and as the speakers of the Pi dialects migrated into their new homelands, 2 simultaneous processes during the 3rd and 2nd millennia, the denotations of the DORW reflexes shifted to, in quotes, wood tree hardness, and yet other reference this would hold especially for the shift to fir, tar, and pinewood, and the like in the Baltic and North Germanic dialects, since the speakers are thought to have migrated into northern coniferous zones during the centuries when the oaks were receding. So, thanks for bearing with me. I think this is all amazing. And when we think of the great oak forest here in the eastern part of North America, especially the United States, and even out west, I mean, there are oaks out in the west. And we think that was really our progenitor of kinds, and that these Europeanists came to America 400 years or so ago, and they saw these great oak forests. They must have gone totally crazy. Anybody have any questions or any thoughts or anything at all? Okay. Now, this is only 2 selections I'm going to read from you here. This is a different book. This is part of the significance of oak back in the 1700s and into the 1800s. This is a book by Gerald Milnes, and he calls his book Signs, Cures, and Witchery. So Dubby Lambert, who was an occultist, she lived her life in occult terms. She was an amazing woman. She lived from 1908 to 2006. She was 98 when she died. I never met her, but Gerald Milnes did, interviewed her several times. She wrote him a ticket, and he went to a white oak tree. There's a big white oak tree right behind the house, and he bored a hole in that there tree and put the ticket in there. A ticket was a piece of paper with a biblical inscription on it, okay? And he bored a hole through the tree, and he put an iron rod in there and took a hammer, hit the iron rod, and hit the ticket. He was trying to disintegrate the ticket, okay? And there's a whole thing about that. If we have time later on, we can discuss that a little bit. That's how he doctored the child. And she done another man the same way out on a big oak tree out here. Talks very broken, not broken English so much, but just very much like a rural person. But with him, he never did find out who it was. She claimed it was her daddy. And up until she had kids, she didn't know how he could devil you, her own daddy. And this wasn't just one person. This was all kinds of people back in all kinds of areas, Pennsylvania and many, many other areas. And this is the last one for this book. The ancients believed that there are some specific places in the cosmos, certain magical sites or places where the spirits of supernatural beings abound. Some of this thinking exists today, which he certainly found out. Dubey's tradition chooses an oak as the species of choice to invoke a powerful charm directed at a perceived witch. Ancients held the oak sacred, especially in Westphalia, which is in the Palatinate in southwest Germany, but also within mythology concerning the god Thor and among the Celtic Druids. Fruit trees were also important. I have a number of books on oak, and this is another great book. This is an Englishman talking about an oak forest, not really an oak forest, but an open, somewhat savanna-like area that was intact up until about 1950. And this place held something like 600 oak trees that were anywhere from about 4 or 5 feet to 7 to 8 feet in diameter. And some guy came along and just knocked them the heck down. And they left 3 or 4. And he got a divorce. He was having trouble with his marriage. And he went here and there, and he finally, and it wasn't too far from him, he went there and he did all these things, and he adored the oak, and he talked about it, and he did all these things. Anyway, that's one of the oak books that you can get. So at some point, I'm going to show you 3 tools that I have here. One is a pitchfork, one is a very, very rare oak clapboard. There's a difference between clapboards and weatherboarding, and then another tool. So let's do these slides. I'm going to be reading a lot of this. You can keep that on.
Do you want it on? I wasn't sure.
It depends on the audience. I mean, it's fine with me.
Okay.
Can you go back to the first one? Sorry. Yeah. So I'm going to be reading a lot of this. The rule of thumb is when you do a PowerPoint presentation, you're not supposed to read from it. Well, I'm going to break that rule. Don't throw acorns at me, please. Or at least nice acorns. You can throw nice acorns, but not bad, if there is such a thing. Forests and oaks and individual trees in New Jersey and elsewhere. What did early pioneers and people see and experience when they first came to New Jersey in the 1650 to 1750 era? Best as we can tell, okay? And the forested landscapes that have existed for tens of millions of years in the state of New Jersey. I didn't mention before that there are about 600 species of oak in the world. And I believe that there's 90 in North America. I could be wrong on that number, but I know the greatest number of oak trees in a basically more or less confined area is the Mexican highlands. And there in that area, there's 190 oak tree species. And of course, as some of you I'm sure well know, that the oak hybridizes like crazy. And this is what happens. So, okay, next. And when the mystique has left you, you're as good as dead. Who said that? Anybody? Anybody? Albert Einstein. Okay? Now, we don't have too many trees like this in our state. I don't know. That's a big, I think it could be bald cypress. It could be out in the west. I didn't denote that. But anyway, so we don't see trees like this, although we could have seen trees that approach that. I do know of a chestnut tree, Castania, that was supposed to be 17 feet in diameter. It's the biggest tree that I've ever heard of in readings that I've done east of the Mississippi River. There were 2 sycamores in Ohio that were found, one by George Washington in the 1750s during the war, the French and Indian War, that was 14.5 feet in diameter. And then there was another tree by Michaud, M-I-C-H-A-U-X, I think. I hope I'm saying that right. And he found a sycamore 15 feet in diameter. Okay. And then there was a walnut tree up in the area of Buffalo, New York, that was 12 feet in diameter, and that was taken down actually, and then they made a whole exhibit of that for years and years. They went around New York State and many other areas. Here's another giant tree. Isn't it amazing? God. Okay? Yet another one. This is supposed to be a Tolkien giant. Look at all the people hovering around at the bottom and just looking out. Okay. Focusing on particular ecological considerations and certain other biostates of affair. How can we know in a general way how big trees were in many places in the eastern states, especially in New Jersey? We have learned a good deal about the primeval and first growth forests in the past several decades, but we have way far to go. Have forest ecologists learned enough about pre-1700 or pre-1600 forests when colonization started to know the basic sizes of forest-grown trees? Largely we have, and how do we mostly know this? By playing the numbers game, okay? The more things you look at in any population of studies, you're going to find out things that if you only limit it yourself to 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 or something like that, okay? Now this is, again, we go back a little bit. Sometimes I like to mix up slides and a PowerPoint. Pagan Lithuanians worshiping a grass snake, an oak. Now how they know that's an oak, I don't know. Does that look like an oak leaf? Maybe. And holy fire from Olos, Magnus, Historia, Digentibus, Septentry. I'm not even going to finish that. Pagan Lithuanian. So it's the same thing down there. Okay. So anyway, this is very, very important. And you can see that from so many citations of oak early on. Okay? Big tree program in New Jersey since the 1930s. New Jersey has kept records of the largest trees within its borders. Joe, do you know if this was one of the earlier ones in the country or what?
I'm not aware, but I know it dates back pretty far. I don't know how that compares to the other states.
I would guess it's probably one of the older ones.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. The New Jersey Forest Service maintains a big tree list and online inventory of the largest tree specimens in the state. Okay. This, I don't particularly believe this. I found this on the internet. It's supposed to be one of the tallest trees in New Jersey, in Audubon, in Camden County. Anybody know this tree at all? No. American elm at 105 feet in height with a 90-foot crown. That's pretty good. Okay? And here we have a hackberry, or Celtis occidentalis in Opacom, which I think is in Warren County. Okay? And this is just a simple display. I think this is along the shore in Cape May County, and it's a display of trees at a state museum, oak on the left, of course, and hickory on the right. By the way, there's no hickory trees, and there haven't been. There may have been 1 million years ago or 5 million years ago, but there's no hickories in Europe at all. Go ahead. Where does the word oak come from? Its etymology or word origin is from Middle English oak, oak, or ache, or achy, from Old English ak, from the Proto-West Germanic ake, from Proto-Germanic age. You can see how complex this is, from Pi, or Proto-Indo-European. And this is crazy. I mean, he fills these, sorry, I have this official stick here, this crazy word, and that's what he used, and I'm not sure how he meant that exactly. Okay. Paul Friedrich, I have mentioned him. How does he play into the tree and oak equation? And I we basically went over that whole thing, okay? And okay, so we did that. All right.
Wow.
Supposed to be the oldest oak tree in the world, whether that's true or not, I don't know. It's maybe 1,500 to 2,000 years old in St. Augustine, Florida. It's very interesting that may be the oldest oak in the world, and the oldest timber frame building in North America is in St. Augustine, and it's from about the 1550s, 1555 or so, something like that. Those are amazing trees, okay? Look at this one. I love this quote. I actually found this just the way it was stated. There is no definitive answer to the location of this 1,000-year-old oak tree. It is believed to be somewhere in the world. That's what I found. Yes, sir.
Would that be in Kalmar, Sweden?
Pretty much. Where is that?
The country of Sweden, the province of Kalmar.
Okay. Could be.
It's 1,000 years old.
But its exact location is a mystery. Isn't that amazing? Somewhere in the world. Oh my God. Okay. Now, this was one of my first experiences with an extraordinary oak tree. This is an Indian trail tree, or sometimes they're called Indian directional trees. Okay. This is in Mahwah, New Jersey. I showed Dee Dee this tree almost just about 50 years ago. This is a tree that the Indians used. They used oak, they used hickory. You'll see that in a minute. This is one of the largest ones, only 1.5 feet above the ground. It's 8 feet across. Right here, you don't see anything. This is a great big hole in this tree. Now this oak tree, this picture, this shot was taken, I guess, 7 years ago. It wasn't my earlier pictures. You'll see that in a minute. And then they took off a whole long branch here. So this thing, as far as I know, there's been 4 books devoted to Indian trail trees. One in New York State, one in Texas, this one guy goes all around. He's from Illinois, and he's been to many areas, and they're supposed to point in the direction of some important thing in the Indian life. Okay? Mm-hmm. And they're also, and this has only come out relatively recently, in the last maybe 5 or 7 years or 8 years or so, that it indicates, it's indicative of a creek that's below it. This particular area in Mahwah, which is just south of the New York State border, was along a lumber trail, and that's why all these stones were placed up, and it goes for about 1 mile or something like that. And the 2 stone fences are separated by about 8 to 10 feet or so. And it's thought to have been where this old lumber trail was. And it goes high up in the town of Mahwah, and it goes to a lower position, okay? But all these branches come up. They're about 15 to 18 inches thick. How old is it? I'd love to have this thing dendridated and really looked at. And the amazing thing about it, and there's a guy also, I didn't mention this, there's a guy also based in Georgia who's done all kinds of research on Indian trail trees. And this, I think, really is one of the most spectacular ones in the country, okay? There's 3 trail trees along this trail. And back of this private property, there's 1 white oak and there's 2 hickory, okay? This is another hickory, or a hickory, okay? Probably only about 3 feet across here, roughly. But look at this intricacy. Look at this. Look at how it just, there was something here that rotted out, but you've got 3 or 4 main stems, maybe 5 stems or something like that. There was something over here. It's amazing. You can begin to see how significant trees were. Okay? This is me in 1973. My dad took that. Tree has hardly changed at all in appearance. Hardly at all. And my dad was the photographer of that. I'm glad he got to see that, those 3 trees. Okay? Dendroarchaeologists, forests of eastern North America, have undergone abrupt transformations over the last several centuries due to a changing land use and climate. Researchers look to pre-settlement forests as a guide for forestry restoration, though much of our understanding of composition and dynamics in pre-settlement forests is based on spatially restricted sediment records, few and fragmented old-growth stands in a narrow range of its site types, and potentially biased historical documentation, that is for sure. Let's go to the next one. And this is the numbers game. Discerning tree sizes is basically, not completely, a numbers game. I have seen and have had enough experience in the past few decades that large trees, meaning at least 2 to 3 feet in diameter, were very plentiful in many geographical areas of the Northeast. That includes New England, New York, New Jersey, PA, and areas south of PA. And you'll see this in a minute or two. Perhaps the very best and most basic proof of this is the size of the very large anchor beams. A series of H-frames appear in Dutch American barns, where H-frames consist of 2 end posts, braces, and then a large horizontal tie. And they get up to 2 feet thick. In hundreds of surviving Dutch American and swing beam barns, these large anchor beams vary their heights from 10 to 25 inches in height. The biggest, pardon me, the greatest size anchor beams in any Dutch American barn, there's about 700 that have been looked at and examined, documented in the last 50, 55 years, maybe close to 60 years now, came down only about a month or 2 ago. And it was in Monmouth County, and it was a tulip wood, and it was 25 inches thick. Okay? Numbers and sizes of anchor beams. So it's been estimated that about 50,000 to 100,000 Dutch American barns with all these H-frames and anchor beams existed before about 1830 or 40 at all these Dutch homesteads in New York and New Jersey. So the number of Dutch American barns I've recorded since the early 60s, which we've said, has been around 750, or 3,000 to 3,500 anchor beams have been found. The average Dutch barn has about 4 anchor beams. Some of them have up to 7 or 8. Some of them have only 3. It has been estimated, okay, we already said that. These numbers indicate that roughly 475,000 anchor beams were once incorporated into these barns, or 1,800 miles of timbers. This number of timbers does not even include other prominent sized Dutch American barn timbers, such as H-frame posts, purlin plates, and wall plates, rafters, and other sill timbers. That's not necessary, but there's just a lot. These H-frames aren't the only timbers in these barns. So when you have something that exists, everything in this universe, as I see it, is contextual. And so you'd have to have large trees. You'd have to have other large trees in a forest setting, in most cases, to have one large tree. You're not going to have just one large tree grow, in most cases, unless it's a field-grown tree, and exist by itself, unless you have others. And this is why I'm convinced. I've had some, not really heated arguments, but some interesting discussions with other people who've seen some of these barns, and they said, well, you know, when the people came over to North America in 1600, 1650 or whatever, you know, the forests really weren't all that prominent and great and extensive and everything. And I think for the most part that's inaccurate, okay? This is the barn that came down about 2 months or so ago. Barn in Monmouth County, New Jersey, in Homedale, by the way. And had anchor beams of tulip wood. It doesn't really look, to my eye, this doesn't really look, but that timber is 2 feet thick. Wow. 2 feet thick, think about that. It's about, well, it's about that high, not including my hand. About that high, I would say.
Amazing.
And for a tree to yield a timber that big, it would probably have to be 4 to 5 feet in diameter, I would think. Did I talk to you about Edlin Piggy?
No.
I didn't?
Go ahead.
Who did I talk to?
You told us yesterday.
I'm sorry?
We were talking about it.
Yes, right. He said that a tree that I introduced to him was 19 inches thick. It was a pitch pine, by the way. Maybe I said this. A pitch pine. It was 19 inches thick. And he said at the butt end, that tree would have had to have been 39 inches across. That doesn't mean DBH, diameter of breast height. Okay. So this must have been at least 4 to 4.5 feet in diameter. Okay? This is a Dutch barn, and this is the H frame. There's a post, the other post is here, and this is the anchor beam. This again is tulip wood, and this is very interesting. We won't get very much into it. And this timber was recycled, it was reused, and this was the former presence. This pocket right here, or mortise, open face mortise, was the home of a placement of a brace, but then it was recycled because of all kinds of dynamics and everything. But that was fairly common in Bergen County, New Jersey, okay? And here is another Dutch barn in Monmouth County. Monmouth County had the biggest timbered barns anywhere that I know of. New York State, New Jersey. There's a barn up in Toronto, well, north of Toronto by about 3 hours, of hemlock. And those timbers, well, the one swing beam, not timbers, it was only one beam. They were, or rather, it was just shy of 3 feet in height. But anyway, this barn is still up. It's deteriorating to some degree. Crop storage is above these saplings here. Horses and cows are on either side. That's the basic function of a Dutch American barn. But these oak timbers were 16 to 17 inches in height, okay? And this is how a Dutch anchor beam articulates with a post, and the extended tenon is right here, as you see, and it's wedged, and that really brings everything together really solidly, okay? And these pioneers, these people who settled and built these Dutch American barns had access to timbers that we don't have, or certainly not normally, okay? So these barns represent how many timbers? Well, we won't go through all of this. The timbers likely number more than 1.5 million. Where do they come from? Almost countless thousands of acres of old growth forest, and most importantly, distributed in dozens of broad-based areas in both the eastern river valleys of New York and the northern 40% or so of New Jersey, and also swing beams. Conclusion, old growth forests that promoted the very large size timbers to be incorporated into the construction of these barns virtually proves that these forests were widespread, okay? Barns in other areas that have very large beams in west central Jersey, namely Warren, Hunterdon, Somerset, Mercer, both anchor beams and swing beams attain sizes very comparable to timbers in New York State. The largest one in New Jersey is in Hunterdon County, and it was of oak, and that swing beam was 26 inches in height. In addition, a number of anchor beams in these barns in Monmouth County, adjacent to the Atlantic Ocean, have the largest, well, I just said that, the largest size anchor beams on average anywhere, okay? Oh yes, okay, so large beams indicate large trees, of course. Large trees often indicate continuous carpets of old growth forests. It has been claimed by certain researchers that Indians, Native Americans had eliminated over the millennia enormous areas of old growth forests in eastern North America. One source says of seafaring voyagers sailing toward the area that later became New England, and I think it wasn't too far from Boston. They smelled the land, I love this, they smelled the land before they saw it, meaning that the Indians were burning wood. And they were inhaling the smoke that Indians were creating by supposedly clearing the land by means of fire. And I have no doubt about that, to attract deer so that they can kill for their food, okay? Can Matson Woods north of, oh yes, north of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, help us to understand sizes of oaks in New Jersey old growth forests? When I was speaking to Roger and the other fellow yesterday, they were saying that there are some areas of really large trees. But this is the one closest to me. I live near Allentown. And it's about a 5 or 6 acre tract of unbroken woods. The oak trees, which must number about 30 or so, maybe even 40, they average between 2.5 to 3 feet in diameter. They're up to, the one tree is up to 4.5 feet in diameter. It's about 107 feet in height. We measured it. And there's another tree only about maybe 75 feet away from it. That's 4 feet in diameter, okay? And that is the biggest tree, forest-grown oak, that I know of in southeast Pennsylvania. That's the tree that's 4.5 feet in diameter. It has a magnificent canopy. That, to me, is otherworldly.
Is that private land, or is it public?
It's public, yeah. Anybody, this is an open thing. Anybody who wants to contact me and we get together several people from this group and other people, you want to meet me there next year, I'd be happy to do that. It's an otherworldly woods. Okay? And this is Ashley, actually. And we went there about 5 years ago, and she's standing right next to the 4.5-foot diameter oak tree. We took chairs there to look at everything and just kind of absorb it all. What I found very interesting is that from the beginning of the trail to this oak tree, it's probably about 250 feet perhaps, but there's no trail that leads off of it, okay? So here, the trail winds. So it goes here and it goes there, and why is that? It's probably not, related to any Indian activity, but right where the biggest tree is, that's where the trail divides. So that's kind of an interesting thing. These two logs were, these two logs were set as a log that was on the side, and we cut it up and we took it home. So don't tell anybody, please. Okay. Biggest oak in all of Pennsylvania. How are we doing with time? It's about a quarter, so we're good. We're good. Biggest oak in all of Pennsylvania. For a forester in Pennsylvania, finding a red oak tree with a circumference of about 26 feet and a height of 120 feet or so is about as likely as seeing Bigfoot. But a giant oak does exist just beyond the fields of Bell Township Farm. That's way out in western PA. Tom McQuaid of Torrance, a forester, is in the process of submitting the tree's measurements for inclusion in the Champion Trees of Pennsylvania, a registry of the state's largest trees measured by several factors, including height and girth, of course. The largest oak tree in the state is in Delaware County and has an 18-foot circumference, smaller than the Bell Township specimen. And he says, let's just say 100 years ago, there wasn't equipment in the state adequate enough to cut down this tree. It was too big to handle. He said, not that he was looking to cut it down, okay? Anybody recognize that? Yeah.
It's not there anymore.
Sad, isn't it?
Yeah. I just passed by it yesterday. You see the big stump.
Oh, yeah.
That's what you see now, yeah.
Did you get out of your car and look at that, or by any chance? I'm just wondering how the stump, has it deteriorated?
It's still huge. I didn't get a chance to get out, so
Yeah,
it's
okay.
somewhere to be, but...
Anybody go there when the tree was coming down? I wanted to take as many photographs as possible. But again, this is in Somerset County at Basking Ridge. I mean, the Basking Ridge is known because of the oak tree. It was 8 feet in diameter, just above the ground. It was about 6.5 feet in diameter, DBH. And the largest limbs were close to 2 feet. I think I measured it off one time. The canopy, or the tree, the branch spread was about 135, 140 feet or so. They tried to save it. They did all kinds of things. They spent money on this, and it was starting to deteriorate. I mean, really get to the point where they knew that something bad was happening. And this was 2015, 2014, 2015. They took seedlings, then they took acorns, and maybe some of you know the story, but they took these acorns, they gathered, 500 of them or whatever, gave it to a few people in Rutgers University, and they grew, they planted them, and they sprouted, became seedlings, and they actually planted we have that, if you could go to the next one. Another shot of the bowl. Oh, by the way, the bowl, the main trunk or the stem, I don't like calling it a stem, but the main trunk, and I wondered when this was going to come down, and nobody really knew. I think they had some indications of it or so, but that, when they cut it down, and this is really fascinating to see this whole thing. There was about maybe 75 to 100 people gathered around the tree. I wanted to see and to know how much deterioration had occurred in the center of the tree, and it was 90% solid. There was a little bit down, but not much.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. Another shot. Look at the wonderful algae and lichen growing and everything there. Look at that. There's certain things that you don't have to talk about. You just look at it. There's another one. And they had to be really careful because they couldn't, in the stipulation in the contract, they said you're not going to go anywhere near the gravestones. So they got this mammoth-sized crane, and of course they cut off a lot of the limbs, which they did, and they tried to lift it up with this crane, but the crane, the arm had to go way over. And when you put your arm of a crane over, it loses a lot of its strength, of course. It's like anything. And so it teetered. They tried to lift it up off the area on the bottom where it was cut, and it teetered and teetered and teetered. And then I guess I got the sense that they didn't really know how much power to put behind it. They didn't want to break anything or anything. So it finally lifted up, and it went away, and you know. But a woodworking shop got a tremendous amount of the wood. I don't know what, this is 6 years ago. I don't know what became of the wood exactly. I went there, gave them a few dollars, and I got a little slice of oak, and that was, so anyway, it was saved. It was saved. They even saved the sawdust. They had this immense amount of sawdust, and I said, that ain't going to be wasted. I think this is a good time to show you this. This is really rare. This is really, really rare. Not from New Jersey, but it's just outside of, actually it's from Delaware. It's from a barn built about 1790. And I mentioned before that there's a difference between clapboards and weatherboarding. A lot of people say whenever they see this horizontal siding on barns, houses, mills, whatever, they say, oh, that has clapboards on it. This is an actual clapboard, and it's extremely rare. And I went to this barn that I was told about back in, I don't even know, 2002. It was even before that. And I saw this mouse-stead wall when you go into a barn, and on either side is a mouse-stead wall on either side of the wagon bay. Okay, and it was sheathed with this. Well, this fell off, and the guy was in there, the owner was in there, and I said, what are you going to do with this board that fell off? And he said, I'm going to give it to you. So anyway, this is what this is, and you can see that this edge here, it's oak. I can't keep that secret from you. It's oak, thin on this edge, thicker on this edge, and it was, imagine a tree stump or a log that's been cut off, and it may be, you know, anywhere from 18 to 20 inches long to 4 or 5 feet or something, and you chop a triangular shaped piece of wood from it, from the bolt. The bolt is the main piece of wood, and it's also tapered. You can see that it's narrow. It's narrow, more narrow on that edge than it is on this edge, and it's just a thing of beauty. And this is in northern Delaware. It's joined by wrought nails, not the cut nails. And anyway, it just, and I could talk a long time about this. It has the grain of oak. It has these flecks that you see of oak. The interesting thing about woodworkers, not all of them, but a number of them, is that I went to a barn last week, I think on Friday, and this woman had a barn built about 1860 or something like that. And she had a number of people come into the barn, and they said, well, I've had these people, and they said, all these timbers are chestnut. Well, they weren't chestnut at all. They were oak. And these people have been working with this stuff for a long time. And it's very simple. It's not a mystery at all. And I can't, is there a log or something over there? There's somewhere over here. I'm just going to say that some of you, I'm sure, know this. There was a section of a okay.
Probably out the road.
Gonna come wheeling.
All right, well, I could swear that there was something over here, but I guess I'm wrong. All right, well, anyway, you look at the end grain where the saw or whatever it was that cut it, is that right? Yes, here. All right, I had it. You look at the end grain here. I'm not going to carry this, it's too darn heavy. But you look at the end grain here.
That's a piece of the Salem White.
I'm sorry?
That's a piece of the Salem White oak, if you're familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. You look at the end grain right here, and from the pith, which is the middle, you look at it, and there's all these rays. And they're, I don't know, a 16th of an inch, a 32nd of an inch, but they go all over and everything. And they're the most prominent and a common tree. Maybe another rare tree is seen more readily. Like beech, you can see what's called these medullary rays, okay? But it's very easy to see this. Now, you do have to have end grain to identify that. But when you've seen enough, oaks, you get to know the, yeah, you have that here. Yeah. You get to know what the grain looks like and everything. You just look at the end grain, look at those medullary rays, and it's just very prominent, and that's how you tell it's oak. Okay? Another shot of the, one of the branches, okay? Another shot, look at that, it goes all the way to the ground. And here's the result, look at it. You have one tree, it's green foliage, it's going crazy. This is about in the middle of April, okay? And here you see all the dead leaves from the previous year, or maybe even a couple of years before that, okay? Really sad, look at all the dead leaves, okay? Dead leaves, isn't that a magnificent shot? God. Okay? Another one, okay? And you can go back, you can see where they tied it up with iron rods to protect it. Okay? Another shot. Okay.
Lightning rod.
I'm sorry?
That's a lightning rod.
Yep.
Rod, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a lightning rod.
Smart.
Okay. All right. It's not a metal.
Right, that one.
Yeah.
Like it's rod.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, this is out of focus, kind of, but anyway, that's the basking ridge oak. Okay. This is one of the, they're about to place into the ground, obviously, behind one of the church buildings, this oak tree that's probably about, oh, I don't know, 12 feet high or something like that. And they grew this at Rutgers, somewhere at the Rutgers Environmental Center. And they transferred it the day, I think the last day, that as a ceremonial kind of thing, they planted this tree. And hopefully that thing is doing well, and I'm sure they've been feeding it and taking care of it a great deal, okay? About to go into the ground, okay? And there it is in the ground. That's a crazy machine that they used to put that in there. Okay? And there's the tree. It's what, maybe 6 inches in diameter. Wow. So, okay? Trees at Borg's Wood. This is in Hackensack, New Jersey. I live right in front of, I guess, you'd say, Summit Woods, which is off Summit Avenue in Hackensack. Anybody from Hackensack? Anybody know Hackensack pretty well? No? Summit Avenue, you have Prospect Avenue where I live, and then Summit Avenue, and back of that, all the way at the almost the northern end of Summit Avenue is the Borg's Woods, and I used to go there quite a lot. And it was preserved in 1994 and 1995. These trees, or these houses on Summit Avenue are very large, and so they just didn't use that land. A wealthy person owned that property, and his name was Borg. He was the guy who owned the Bergen Evening Record that later became the Record, and in any event, they preserved around 20 acres. And there was a lot of sweet gum there, liquid amber, and other trees there. It's now owned and managed by the County of Bergen Parks Department, and it is not in danger of being developed. And the 10 acres nearby that was developed was field succession growth. So there are 15 acres preserved, I'm sorry, not 20. There are many trees over 8 feet in circumference and some over 10 feet. The largest is a tulip tree and about 13 feet in circumference. Trees over 10 feet in circumference include red oak, black oak, and beech. It's really nice to have a really, I think there's about 45,000 people in Hackensack as residents. And so it's nice to have that clump of woods in a forest setting still there, okay? Old graffiti, very old graffiti at Borg's Woods. So, all right, so there are several beech trees there with really old graffiti, supposedly. One clearly says DB 1777, or perhaps D8 1777 for December the 8th. Okay, it looks exactly as it did over 30 years ago when I first found it, and therefore, this is not me speaking, this is someone else, and therefore I do not believe it is a fraud. Perhaps it was carved by an American or British soldier. The tree itself is hollow, and there's fire damage inside the trunk. It basically didn't grow at all from surveys of a 20-year period, 1987 to 2007. It's believed to be hundreds of years old. Another old beech says Beechwood, NJ, 1765, and this is carved at such a height that it could only have been done on horseback, which is kind of an interesting thing. I believe that is the case. I would imagine that these two trees could have been 100 years old or more at the time of the carvings. Other trees have carvings too old or too weathered to decipher by my eye. I did a history, a homestead history back about 15, 18 years ago, and there was a beech tree there that clearly had a date of like 1895 or something like that. And that, I believe, was an authentic thing. Okay? Now, we're going to get a little bit out of New Jersey into other areas, predominantly Pennsylvania. Isaac Zane traveled the Lehigh Indian Trail path that was stretched from Bethlehem to Wilkes-Barre, who was there in 1758. And he said he was impressed with the great hills and dales and the forests of white pine. And he said, I have not seen before the like for height, bigness, and straightness. Again, we see great evidence of very large trees the pioneers saw in the 18th century. Okay? But comment on cleared part of Franklin County, the Welsh Barrens. It was an area about 5 by 7 miles, cleared of attractive land. Okay, the residue, I'll read the book toward the bottom. The residue abounds in the largest oaks, locust, walnut, and hickory. The question remains, what other extensive cleared tracts of forested land existed in southern Pennsylvania, okay? And we have, okay, was fire use actually so prevalent in pre-colonial times by Native Americans? Study of January 2020. Research published in the journal Nature Sustainability tests this human-centric view of the past using interdisciplinary retrospective science. Over the last century, scientists have collected sediment cores from hundreds of lakes around the world, enabling them to reconstruct past environments and ecosystems. A team of paleoecologists and archaeologists collected sediment cores from 23 ponds across southern New England. They analyzed ancient pollen grains, fragments of charcoal, and clues about past water depth, all preserved in the mud, allowing them to create a record of vegetation, fire, and climate over thousands of years. Yes, sir.
So I just want to bring something up you mentioned, and I was a kid in northeast Pennsylvania. My parents had a house up at a place called Walker Lake. As you went down this roadway, at that end, and there was a little valley or a stream, and we'd go there and get water. And there had to be 8 white pines that you could take 15 people hand in hand and barely get around. That's how big they were.
Did you say 15?
Yes, I'm talking massive.
That's massive.
I used to camp under them and sleep in a bed of needles that was so thick it was like being on the best mattress in the world. I can show you.
Yeah. This doesn't happen to be off Route 209.
It's
because I know a place that has some really big pines, although they're not like 15 people around.
These things, one went over about 15 years ago, and it was ridiculous. Absolutely.
How many feet in diameter would you say?
15
feet?
Huge trees. There's 6 of them there, and they were literally in this little stream valley, and everything around it is obviously been cut.
Could you still go there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I need your phone number.
I can show you a map on how to get there. We used to go there and get water for the house because we didn't have our well back then.
And what?
That's amazing.
What county is this?
It's in Pike County, Pennsylvania, northeast. There are just probably 6 of them there, and they're incredible.
I would say.
Literally, I was wondering
How How many acres would you say is there?
It's hard to say. It's a tiny little spot. I mean, after the stream comes out, it actually joins with the Delaware, not too, maybe a quarter mile away. It's not that big of an area. It's tiny.
Well, you're talking about just the area that I know of where these trees. Are there hemlock there?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember.
When were you last there?
10 years ago.
All right. Yeah, that's about when I was to this other spot.
So it's not, if you know where Twin Lakes is, it's Walker Lake. It's a tiny little lake.
Yeah.
And those trees have been my friends, if you will, my entire life. They're a memory that I'll never forget.
Yes, of course.
Because they're just incredible.
Of course.
And they're white pine and they're massive.
Well, we went to this other spot. It's off at 209, on the west side of 209, and it's south of Route 739, which is an east-west road, predominantly. And these trees were supposed to be the biggest in the state, but east of Cook Forest. You know Cook Forest? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, Cook Forest is an area in northwest PA, and there are trees there, white pine trees, 3 and 4 feet in diameter.
If you come down off this mountain, you're going into Shahola, Pennsylvania.
Yes.
There is a registered old growth tract there. So this is maybe a couple of miles away in an area that, again, because it's in this stream little valley, I don't think it was logged.
Yeah, wow.
It's just incredible.
Wow.
When I can show you on a map where it is.
It was 160 feet high, this one white pine, and 2 or 3 others that were 150 feet high.
I think you can see these trees from an aerial, from
Yeah.
a Google map. I have it on my phone. I'll show you later. I don't want to take too much time out of your time.
That's one reason why I like to do these talks, because people just say this and say that.
And mind you, there's only like 6. It's not like a giant growth.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah.
small.
Well, you're describing a lot of this very similarly, because there was probably no more than about 8 or 10 trees that I knew of. But anyway, where are we?
I need to see a road. Can you post the roads?
I guess I finished that. Did I finish? No, okay. More to say, the study seems to contradict the theory, this is the controversial thing, seems to contradict the theory that people had significant ecological impacts on southern New England before European arrival. It reveals that old forests shaped by climate change and natural processes prevailed across the region for thousands of years. When the mud was analyzed in the study ponds, what was found was the obvious signature of forest clearance by 17th century European colonists. Pollen from forest species declined, while pollen from agricultural and weedy species like ragweed increased abruptly. This evidence clearly shows that New England's open land habitats owe their existence to colonial European deforestation and agriculture. Who has not seen the slab of wood, Atlantic white cedar? Yeah, okay. Anybody not see that slab of wood that's probably about 5 feet, maybe 4 feet in height by maybe 2.5 feet wide? Anybody not see that? That came from the Hackensack Meadowlands, which I knew nothing about until about 3:30 yesterday afternoon. I'm from Hackensack, and the Meadowlands is maybe 10, 12 miles south of that, maybe a little more, or something like that. And they just dug it up, and they said, look what we found, and there it was. Incredible. I never knew that story. Okay? But another study says, May 2019 study, Eastern forest shaped more by Native Americans burning than climate change. Source, Penn State. Native Americans' use of fire to manage vegetation in what is now the eastern United States was more profound than previously believed. According to a researcher who determined that forest composition change in the region was caused more by land than by climate change. Well, I would like to talk to somebody like that and tell him about that little study that we did before about anchor beams in Dutch American barns that were all over the place. And would he still say the same thing if he saw that? I don't know. Okay? Okay. All right. Well, let's get away from that. Engraving by Theodore Debray of the 1580s of Indian farms near Roanoke. Of course, Roanoke, they settled there for a short time, and then they disappeared, and apparently this is from about that time frame. Okay? Just to give you a sense. This is up in the Adirondacks. Look at that shot. Holy mackerel. There's supposed to be 50,000 acres of virgin old growth forest up until the mid-1980s, and then there was a very, very bad storm that eliminated about 20% of the woods. But that's typical. I spoke to a guy who had been through a great deal of the Adirondacks, and he said the trees up there, they would get up to 5 to 6 feet in diameter. Okay? This is the first interior shot we see of a barn, and one reason I got into historic architecture is because houses and barns and mills are made from timbers of trees. And so there's all kinds of things here that you can look at and that you can study, and I got fascinated with it, and that's what I do. Okay? Dominey family and buildings on Long Island. This is very interesting. Twice in 2 years, 1771 and 1791, in the account book B of the Dominey family preserved archives, 9 loads of timber were carted for Nathaniel Dominey IV, the 5 miles from a forest known as Northwest Woods in April 1771. This is on Long Island. East Hampton was the destination point. And then, again, in account book B for Nathaniel V, in April 1791, timber was carted from the Northwest Woods, and pine boards and shingles were carted from Sag Harbor in June 1791. From the timber framing article, Dominey House and Shops History of Construction, thanks to Robert Hefner, author, and editors Michael Cuba and Adam Miller. Okay? What do these account books entries do for us? They help us to visualize a little bit more on the decisions that were made 250 years ago, 1771, and 230 years ago, 1791. Where and how will we satisfy all of our wood needs? Why did the Dominey family go to the Northwest Woods as opposed to another place? 20 years separate their first purchase from their second purchase, at least the ones that have been recorded. Northwest Woods is still present on the North Shore. Is it the same one? Okay? Tools needed: a regular axe and a broadaxe. Do you have any tools here at all? You have some, like a PV.
We have some logging things.
Yeah. A regular axe and a broadaxe, a saw, a good crosscut saw or chainsaw tools to mark measurements and cutting lines, chalk and carpenter's pencil, measuring tape or ruler, log dogs to keep the log in place. Those are metal, like very large metal staples that secure the log while it's in place so it doesn't move. The log dogs to keep the log dogs to keep the log in place. This is important for safety. And if you don't have log dogs, you can use a regular old piece of wood, such as a 2x4 stuck in the ground and screw it or nail it to the log. This is where I talk about this a little bit. So this is a hay fork, believe it or not. I don't know, I acquired this last year, and I went to a homestead and asked and told the woman, I said, you have a magnificent tool here. She was like 91 or 92. And I said, if you ever want to sell that, please let me know. And she gave it to me. So that was the end of that. But this is, most of the hay forks that we know are iron. They have metal tines. They're either 3 or 4, sometimes even 5. But this was really made by a real country bumpkin who maybe couldn't afford one at the local store. So he just took probably a board or a plank being a board over 1.5 inches thick. So if you have a board that's over 1.5 inches thick, that's really considered a plank. So that's probably a plank, and then you just carve this out, and it's just a wonderful vernacular expression of an American tool. And you can see the repairs, I'm assuming, here. Mm-hmm. Here you see the break or a split, and there's one right here. So I'm assuming that this is a repair. The reason I'm saying that I'm assuming that this is a repair is because of this book here that gets into all kinds of occult things that early Americans did, and they used metal to ward away evil. So it might have been a double function for all we know. But this is not what you find in Walmart. This is not what you find, this is real Americana as far as I'm concerned.
What part of Pennsylvania did you find that in?
I found this in Berks County. Yeah, Berks County. Yep. And the woman who who had this was named Boots, and she was a crazed horse person. And anyway, so that's what this is. It was a different world. It was a very different world. And I'm not exaggerating when I say to you, I know not everybody's available today to come to this, but I kind of consider you people pretty special. So you came here and wanted to listen to what we're talking about, okay? That tool right there is a broad axe. So you have a felled log. It's cut at the ends, of course. You have a scoring axe that you come in on this spot, that spot, and probably another spot there. And then you take your broad axe, and the handle is bent, and you come out, you snap a line, you know where it's straight, where you want to cut it, and then it just chops off. You chop off a block or a juggle, a juggle. And when it goes too deep, they're called juggling marks, okay? And this, yeah, that right here, that right there is a dog, okay? Victoria, Canada, circa 1912. Look at the arms of those guys, okay? These are goose-wing broad axes. These are not just broad axes, okay? Can you go back to? Right. See this? You have the it's the pole here, and then the area here around the handle itself. But you have areas that are symmetrical on either side of the midline, so to speak. Okay, so it's symmetrical. And go two more. And here you have a German-based goose-wing broad axes. Okay, and they're very different. They're very European-like. And, well, you can see they're not symmetrical at all. They come out at an angle here. And this is the greatest collection. I took this picture about 2010 or so. And this guy went around for about 30 years. This is the guy in Pennsylvania, in Lehigh County, in the Lehigh Valley, of course. And he had about 60 of these tools. And I tried to purchase one, and that didn't happen. But the Smithsonian Institute wanted one of this collection, and they were going for a great deal of money. And they did get a fair amount of them. But he had more tools like this. But this is probably the greatest collection of goose-wing broad axes that ever was assembled. Okay. Other evidence of big trees. This is very good. Peter Kalm the Finn, who traveled to North America. We can break for a few minutes if you want to. Who traveled to North America in the 1747 to 1751 era, met an old Swede in Philadelphia who told him, he told Kalm, that a great forest once stood where Philadelphia was located. He apparently went there, this guy who told Kalm. He was there from the mid-1680s, okay? Kalm described not only the flora and fauna of the New World, but also the lives of Native Americans and the British and French colonists whom he met. Kalm says in his treatise, the benefits which England could derive from her colonies in North America. He said that in June of 1763. And Peter Kalm, now let us see what the Plant Kingdom has to offer. The country is overgrown with heavy forests containing many kinds of trees. There are 9 or 10 different oaks, nearly all of which can be used in shipbuilding. Well, sure, the English were very interested in that. Yes, sir.
In your speculation about volume of the forest, particularly the oaks, you're using as an appraisal means the volume of historically constructed barns.
Yeah.
But shipbuilding was a big consumer.
It is another big thing, absolutely.
A typical seagoing vessel could use 1,000 trees.
Oh yes, oh yes.
And warships, which the British were building here as well, could be as many as 3,000 trees just for one vessel. And that would easily
deplete all kinds
equal or not, or maybe even surpass the amount of barn volume.
It could have. I don't think there were 50 to 100,000 ships, but there were a lot. But I mean, to create the type of, yes, absolutely, 100. Yeah, I mean,
South Jersey was a big constructor of mid-sized seagoing vessels using all the white oak trees that were there from 1830 to 1850, and then they were all gone.
Yes. No, what you're
Out of
saying is,
Alloway's Creek.
some of the greatest craftsmanship I've ever heard assigned to anybody who built a kind of object, okay, material culture, were the shipbuilders, except for possibly clockmakers. Clockmakers were incredibly skilled, but possibly besides that, shipbuilders were amazing at what they did and how they cut their, but they needed old growth forests. Old growth forest trees were your friends. They didn't fight you. You know, they were just like, you know, they grew for 200 to 300 years or more or something. And you've heard of pumpkin pine and how you know, it was very easy to work with and it was very durable and everything. You know, we've lost the whole world. You know, what was it like to be back here 300 years ago? It was just incredible. That's why that Atlantic white cedar slice just impressed me so much. And again, further evidence to me that that the world 300 years ago and more were just so different than what it is today. Okay? That is, I'm sorry I didn't bring it, I forgot. But this is a slice of oak, and you can clearly see the, well, maybe not so clearly, but you see these medullary rays coming out from the side. That has about, if I have the right oak slice, I have a number of them, it's about 150 annual growth rate, but look at how thin it is. Look at how thin the annual growth rings are. The way it was. The way it was. And white oak grows much more, in most cases, white oak grows much more slowly than red oak. Red oak is much faster growing. Okay? That big enough for you?
Mm.
No, I wish I could sign.
Giant oak tree in England. The biggest oak tree that I've heard is about, anywhere at any time, was about 14 and a half feet in diameter. That was the biggest that I've ever heard. I don't know how big that is. Do you think 15 people would go around that?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Could be.
Mm-hmm.
Some of their oaks there in England, north of London, are about 800 years old.
Yeah. Have you ever been to Hatfield Forest?
I've been near there.
Okay.
It's up in, I want to say Boscobel is the place.
Yeah. Well, Boscobel, the one that I'm thinking is New York.
Is that in New York?
Yeah, in New York. I'm sorry.
No, I'm
sorry.
talking Boscobel, England.
You said, as soon as you said that, I'm thinking of New York, Boscobel.
No.
Yeah, right. Okay. No, I don't know that. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Next. Sketch of old bur oak in southwest Michigan. Some of those bur oaks get very, very large. Very large indeed. Okay? More evidence from Peter Kahn. PK says pine forests cover large areas. White pine masts obtained here are superior to any Europe can produce. Huge quantities of boards and joists are exported annually to the American islands. Readings from Kahn and Environmental Change in the mid-18th century by Tim Morgan, professor of history at the university in Newport News, Virginia. Okay? Fall of the monarch pine. This is from the magazine American Forestry, which I'm sure a number of you know. This is the 1918 issue. Several years ago, a white pine tree in Pennsylvania was measured and felled. It was 155 feet high, almost 4 feet in diameter, at breast height. Also, not in our area, but a white pine came down. This is the one that I wanted to tell you about, especially. It came down at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire many, many decades ago. It supposedly stood 240 feet high. And I believe it. Why not? There was a white pine in the eastern Great Smoky Mountains that was 208 feet high. And a guy that I know climbed that tree. And he got to near the very top, took a tape measure, and hooked it on somehow on the top, and dropped it 208 feet. And then it lost 20 feet, so it was no longer 200 feet high. So why not? I mean, that's 32 feet higher, so why couldn't, yeah.
The Native Americans of the Council of the Five Nations, which goes from the Iroquois down to the Lenni Lenape, they considered the white pine as a symbolic tree for peace. And whenever they convened together to have a conference about peace,
Yes.
they incorporated the white pine in their ceremony.
Let me ask you a question. How many
And
needles?
they would bury their tomahawks and weapons at the base of a white oak,
Yeah.
white pine.
Right. How many needles does the typical fascicle have of a white pine?
5.
Exactly. 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 5 nations, 5 needles.
That's
We
good.
call that the signature of the doctrine of signature. It's a wonderful. That's a whole other thing. Don't get me into that because we'll be here until 3 o'clock. Yeah, that's good. Pitch pine has 3 needles. Is that right?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Like-
Now the other part of our talk, images. La Forêt, the forest, the name bestowed on the Notre Dame. Oh yeah, this is a great story. On the Notre Dame roof framing. The single truss, very recently completed. Oh, one thing I didn't say, this book is not just about barns. It has 2, pardon me, it has 2 chapters on forest trees. One concentrates on European forests in about, well, before that too, but up until the 1600s, 1700s when America was settled, and an American source of forest resources. So I had to include this in the book. The name bestowed on the Notre Dame roof framing, the single truss very recently completed, which was about 2 years or so ago. Richard Babcock would say, go to the trees, okay? The Panshanger Oak by Thomas Medlin, 1814 painting in the county of Hereford. This is a really well-known, do you know that name of this? This is a really well-known oak in England, okay? Now this next one, I'll try to read this. Advertisement in 1831, the Panshanger Oak. Mr. Medlin respectfully informs the nobility and gentry of the county of Hereford, something public in general, that his plate of the above magnificent tree, something they published and maybe had at Mr. Medlin's, something, all right, well, in any event, this was being talked about in 1831.
You're talking about a book plate?
A book plate?
Yeah, maybe it's a book
Yeah,
plate.
yeah, right.
It is.
Right.
With
It
an
is?
illustration.
Somebody say it
That's
is?
what he's saying. A book plate is available at the, at Austin booksellers.
Okay, next one. There it is.
Beautiful. Really nice.
Okay. A traditional British saying says, the monarch oak, the patriarch of trees, shoots rise up and spread by slow degrees. 3 centuries he grows, and 3 he stays, supreme in state, and in 3 more decays. There's also a thing very similar to that in Japan, where they gave it actually 400 years, and it was broken up into 3, 400, 400, 400. So this is not just a British saying, okay? That is the tree that I told you about before that was so large, and this fellow was from Torrance, and look at that. We had to go way, way back. I'm very careful with ticks and everything, but I went there anyway. I didn't want to not see it. And we got back to his house, and I said, sir, I know this is going to sound very strange, but I'm going to ask you anyway, could I take a shower? And I took a shower, and I didn't want to take any chances. I was in a lot of woods and this, that, and the other. Anyway, that's a darn big tree. 8.5 feet, a few feet above the ground. Look at that. That's a red oak, though. Okay? This is where I live in Lower Macungie Township in Lehigh County, a nice sized oak tree, probably about 3.5 feet in diameter, possibly 4. Okay? Ah, the sacred oak. Yes, the sacred oak in Ole Valley in Berks County with a 6-foot diameter, a chinkapin or yellow oak. So this tree is a real rarity. Now again, it may not have been a real rarity 300 years ago, but chinkapin oak is extremely rare. Native Americans went out there twice in 2007, 2009, and did their incantations and did all this stuff. I missed the one in 2007. I did make the one in 2009. The tree was slowly dying over a period of about 300 years. They think the tree is about 350 to 400 years old. And it's a field-grown tree. And a lady spent a ton of money, or a half a ton of money, culling out all the dead branches and everything. And the tree is very healthy now. Not only do you have the greatest place of biomass in the world is the northern redwoods at Humboldt State Park. The trees there are up to at least 16 feet in diameter. Greatest spot on the earth that has biomass. There's also another term called necromass, or the mass of a tree that's actually dead. Okay, and actually most of these trees are dead. Obviously, they don't have the camium, they don't have the sapwood, which is alive, of course. So it's actually, a lot of these trees are dead. But I take that kind of dead over alive and a lot of other things that swarm the earth. Anyway, okay? This is looking up, of course. That was probably a lightning strike right here. Look at the limbs, the size of the limbs, okay? That's a tree in Burlington County, New Jersey. We go back to the New Jersey, okay? This is back in Pennsylvania, in Berks County, just a line of trees. Those are kind of nice. I had a friend that I was with, and I asked her to come here too, and she couldn't make it. She had to take her daughter out to Alaska. They were driving out there.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, she went crazy over this. Okay? This is in back of the Moravian College in Bethlehem, in PA. Okay, that's an elm tree. It's about 7.5 feet in diameter. That's a big baby. Okay?
I hugged that tree.
You what?
I hugged that tree.
You hugged that tree? Is that right?
Yes, I did.
Good man. Maybe that's why it's growing so well.
I guess. It's waiting for my return.
Well, we'll go back there. Keep going back there.
Yes, I will.
All right. Anyway, this is another, I had a job in that area anyway, minding my own business, driving down the road, and there was this very pleasant looking elm tree. Okay? This tree, this is a red oak, and it's in Monroe County, right? No, I'm sorry, Carbon County. And this is on the west side. This tree has more lichen and algae growing over it more than any other tree in the east that I've ever seen. They just went nuts. I don't know why. There's a special little microenvironment or something. I have no idea why, but they just went nuts over inhabiting that tree. And a big branch came down. I don't have that shot there, okay? This is just another tree just standing idly by this brick house in PA, probably close to 4 feet in diameter, a white oak, okay? Now this is where you can easily tell white oak. I mean, anybody want to say something else to that, you can. But look at this big post in a barn, of course, and you see this flecking here? That is very, very much oak-like. Now, do other people know other trees that have that kind of flecking? I don't. So, I mean, that's how I identify, especially when you're in a barn, because oak was used so often, it wasn't even funny. I'm not going to leave you out. This is a yoke, not a joke, but a yoke, for probably a geese or some small animal like that. And I'm not sure if it's oak. It has very much an oak grain. It could be hickory. It's probably more hickory, because hickory could bend like ash much more readily than oak. Anyway, this is just another tool. They just bent it. They put it in they would steam it and then put it in a form, and it would conform to the form and be bent, and that was their lives, okay? This is the tree up in Wyoming County. I saw that 2 years ago. It just really being left alone. I'm sorry. The guy who was there was super special, and his son were super spiritual. They were just crazy, and the guy loved it. There's an old saying, and I may have this later on in the talk. I said, if you don't love trees, you don't love God. Okay? A most probable oak on the edge of the field in England. Okay? Look at that. Ain't that something? This is very much like the Indian Trail tree on the one side. Remember I said you couldn't see it. This is it was very long and fairly narrow, but a former branch obviously was there, and that's what you see there, okay? Again, our friend, the Basking Ridge White Oak, okay? It doesn't get any better than that. I just love the tang of oak wood. There's hardly anything better in this world. Okay? A pedunculate oak in Bouvardi's, France. Okay? Hanging out in a hollow out. That's what I thought the Basking Ridge oak would more or less look like. Anybody here see the Y oak in Maryland, in Maryland? The Y oak was 11 feet in diameter, and it was 90% hollow. And on a very clear day, almost a windless day, it fell over. And it was about 400 feet. The only tree that I know of that owns itself, the state of Delaware, I'm sorry, Maryland. The state of Maryland said in 1930, 35 or something like that, that this tree owns itself. And back then it was, of course, it was very, very large, okay? Pack Forest in Warrensburg. Were you talking about Pack Forest? No? Okay. This is up near Lake George. But these ladies didn't have anything more to do that day, so they just adorned this tree.
It's a good picture.
Yeah.
Okay? And that picture wouldn't be as potent or powerful if they didn't wear the hats. This barn is in what state? What state do you think that might be?
State of disrepair.
Good one. Good one.
Can I remember that? I mean, can I get your name? State of disrepair. Very good. Anybody?
Yeah.
No? Joe, we were talking about that state before.
I want to say it looks like New York to me a little bit.
Yeah, but we were talking about another state that you want to go to.
Oh, California?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, that barn is in California. The state of disrepair. Oh boy. Yeah, that's in California. Those roof shakes are very long. I think they're over 2 feet long. But anyway, I was out there and I took this picture, okay? In the same state this tree grows. We all know where that is. Okay? Now, this is the cosmic tree or the world tree. And don't ask me how to pronounce this. It's Yggdrasil. And that was a very, very important thing centuries ago. And anyway, that is a depiction of this in the 17th century Icelandic miniature. There's the world tree, okay? Thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. As someone once said, if you don't love trees, you don't love God. And as William Penn said, wood is a substance with a soul. It's not what we see, it is what we see in something that counts. It gives meaning to our lives, like our trees and timber barns. If we love something, we want to protect it. Thank you again for being here today. Yes, sir.
You highlighted the importance of barns and the wood that's making up barns, most of which is oak.
Well, in certain areas in upstate New York, there's many pine.
If you have an opportunity to visit the old New Jersey Fairgrounds, which is now grounds for sculpture, they have a restaurant there called Rats, which they built, and all the timbers within that restaurant are from 3 separate barns that were dismantled in New York State and brought there and repurposed for its construction.
Has everybody signed that, where is that clipboard? Everybody signed this clipboard, the paper for my Barn News and Events newsletter? And I have a lot of things with trees in there. Everybody sign that? Anybody not sign it?
I'll sign it.
Oh, you haven't signed it?
I'm last. That's all right. I'll get to it.
Okay.
I have a question. First off, if anybody wants a copy of your presentation, do you object to them having a copy? Can I get them a copy of your PowerPoint if they want There's a lot of people that didn't make it today, or do you object to that?
Yes, my name isn't on it, so I don't know.
Okay, so yes, they can have it, or yes?
No, they can have it, they
Okay.
can have it, but I would like my name put on there. so
Okay,
that-
sure, make sure that that's the case. And then my other question is, I know when you start off, you were talking about like spirituality and oaks and like, you know, cultist groups like to come gather to the oak, but I don't know if I really caught the concept, like why oak? There's so many trees that have medicinal value that could be considered like witchcraft like type trees or something. I'm just wondering why the oak? Was it size? Was it, you know, what were the reasons?
I think part of it was their size.
Yeah.
I also think that it had to do with, did you ever hear of this, that if you go into a mixed forest, that you should go under certain trees for protection if it's lightning out and not others? You ever hear that?
No.
Like beech and oak.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it may be that kind of thing. I mean, think about the
Because they get struck by lightning. If they don't have lightning protection, they'll get struck by lightning. That's like a factual
yes,
thing.
and I think that's.
Maybe they thought that was more protection.
Yeah, I mean, you know, why are we even talking about oak today? I mean, we're not Druidic. We didn't live 2,000 years ago and everything. Yet we
It just made me wonder, like, why not choose some other trees that, like, you know,
Yeah,
juniper
but-
or something has a medicinal value or something that made them
right.
like the
But
spiritual groups.
I don't know if they actually. Well, I can't say. I really
Yeah.
can't. Like the yew was very important. The hazel was very important.
Yeah.
Rowan was very important. The ash was very important. Ash was put on the threshold of the door so that the devil couldn't cross over it. You know, but
So
you
I-
know, your question is completely
Don't
legitimate.
the acorns feed the animals? I mean, that was.
Yeah, pigs, that was
the whole
mass.
thing.
But I would think it would have to be oaks of size, because a smaller oak, what would be the thing that would be impressive about that? But it would have to be one of these massive oaks, wouldn't you think? I mean, would have to be a bigger size oak.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. And I'm sure they grew that big.
Yeah.
I asked this gentleman if he had been to Hatfield, in the Hatfield Forest in England, and he said he was near it or something. But if you ever want to go to England, have you been to England?
No.
If you want to go to England, I've never
Let's
been there
do it.
either, but I've talked to people about it and everything. If you want to go to a medieval-like forest, go to Hatfield Forest. Have you heard of that?
I know of it. yes.
Okay, yeah, so, you know, those people are gone. By the way, just to make a small comment about the Druids, there's very, very little known about the Druids, actually. The actual documentation, the archival sources and everything.
Very
But
secretive.
Pliny or Pliny the Elder talked about it, Caesar talked about the Druids.
Interesting.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I guess my other question is too, when you feature the trail tree, and
Yeah.
you said it, you know, significance referring to the Indians and so forth. But in that first tree that you featured,
Yeah.
would that be like direction, due north, you know, something like that? Do you know what that was there?
I should be careful with that.
Yeah.
It does point in the direction of an important, significant thing in Indian life.
Right. But you're not exactly sure what that is at this point in time.
The best, most authoritative book that I've seen is the book on trail trees in Texas. And these people down there went crazy with really heavily documenting all kinds of things. They have all these trees down there that you could think that were directional or trail trees, but they only assigned 8 or 9 as of this printing that came out 5, 6, 7 years ago. There was only 8 or 9 trees that they had virtual proof that these were Indian trail trees, that they were involved with the Indians.
Right, but they would alter the tree, bend the branch, and
Right.
keep it in place some way to point either their trail or a
That's right.
significant
Yes.
feature that they want to direct their.
I get all that. I just mean if that particular tree in Mawa was found, it'd be just nice to know what that significance was if people
Sure.
had questions. Yeah, that's pointing due north because that's how they used to get on the main trail or something.
Right.
You know, it
I
just,
think it's actually pointing west.
It's pointing west?
East and west.
east and west.
Yeah, that lumber trail, that old lumber trail points east and west.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, but it might have some more significant
Oh yeah.
beyond that. Yeah.
I mean, if you get into, all of us read here and everything. You get into statements that are made by scholars and what kind of research have they done. Even he has been. Where's my book? This one. He's been criticized for the research that he did and the stuff that he gets into and everything. You know, I mean, where does truth start and where does it end? I mean, you know, it's just hard to say. It really is. So,
Well, yeah, I live a couple miles from here. A couple years ago, we had a tree come down.
Got a
It's
picture of it.
5-foot diameter oak in my backyard.
that's it.
You can see it for space.
And how big was it again?
5 foot in diameter.
Wow.
It was actually 3 trunks that fused
Yeah.
together,
Yeah.
and one of them fell,
Mm-hmm.
and the
Yeah,
other
two
two
were
were
about to.
about
Oh,
to
yeah.
fall, so we had to cut
Oh,
it.
yeah.
But,
And that was an oak.
Yeah.
yeah.
I forgot what
And
kind it was.
there's one on the corner, well, at the end of Ollie Burke Road where we live, and Lakehurst Avenue.
Take a quick peek.
If you do Google Maps, well, I tried to,
That's a good one. You want to see?
but that tree is humongous.
Yes.
And the guy he was complaining about raking the leaves and he wanted to chop down the tree.
Yeah, I've heard
Oh,
that.
God.
Yeah, how did you threaten him? I'm just interested.
I didn't threaten him.
You didn't?
But I told
My
him.
opinion of you is now changed.
I didn't have to.
So-
I guilted him into.
Oh, that's fine. I don't care how you do it. I mean, it doesn't matter to
I
me.
said, there were 2 that were the same size pretty much, and they chopped the one down because they were improving, they were repaving the road.
Yeah.
They didn't have to cut it down, but somebody decided to cut it down.
Yeah.
And,
Doesn't that kill you? Oh,
but
boy.
It's a Salem oak.
Oh, really? Can you send that to me?
And that one did have a lot of heart
Give me
work
a
from the
card.
base to about 20 feet up, so it
Yeah.
wasn't like the other one where it was solid and went down.
Right.
That one did have it.
Right, yeah.
but I just,
Oh, you know what?
I just did a screenshot of the tree that I was talking about.
In the backyard.
That's,
right there, that
on the
circle
end of Oliver.
is the tree trunk. Stop.
Just say
All
that.
right, where is it?
That's in a different cemetery, but it's in Salem County.
Oh, okay.
They both actually
Yeah,
happen to be in
5 foot diameter
cemeteries.
oak.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, thank
A little over 80 rings.
I'm gonna give you the exact, I'm also contacting some friends who still live
That's
up
a
there.
Salem oak.
Okay.
Because technically it's a closed community.
Yeah.
You'll need somebody to go in with.
Okay, sure.
I think it would be much older than that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Here we go.
I told my wife I was down there, she's like,
This is the one that's on the end of Ollie Burke Road. And there's a branch that comes out the other way that you can't see from this perspective. That's actually almost as big as the trunk. It's huge.
Thanks again for doing this today, Greg. That was great.
Go around the
It was
big
excellent.
room, we'll show you the big, white.
You look at the car, you look at the tree.
For display on.
I wanted to contact you.
Signature.
I don't know if you're.
Well, I'll show you, we have
You can
forestry
look that
tools
up.
down here, and then there's those lamp cedar.
Masters of
We
Biology.
have ones that we use.
Yeah, that's a shame.
on that display, can
Really
you pull
nice
up Google
research
Maps?
project
Did you get a card?
On there.
for somebody, unless I'm.